I'm super excited to be on this webinar with everybody today to share the story around work that is going on in two divisions that I've worked in, Virginia Beach City Public Schools and now Hampton City Schools, both in Virginia. And I'm excited to hear from anybody in the audience in regards to things that they're specifically focusing on. But as we go through today, one thing that I want you to think about is one question or one thing you would like to take away from today's session, and you can put that in the chat box. Mitchell will be looking at the chat box, so if you have any questions along the way, please put those in the chat box, and then he will let me know. I shared with them to feel free to stop me at any point through the webinar to make sure that I'm answering the questions, because this webinar is really for you, and we want to make sure folks are really able to implement what they need to ensure all students have access to quality text and programming year-round. It's that 365-day approach that we need to look at for all of our kids. And so that's what our focus is going to be today. And so why do we need to do that? Why do we need to ensure that there's equity and access in education? Well, one of the things that you're going to think about today is your why behind this work. And then Simon Sinek talks about you have to start with your why, then you go to your how, and then it helps you lead to your outcomes, which is the what. So why is access to text vital for all? When you think about access to text, think about students across your district, your schools, and think about not just at school access, but at home access. And is that 365 days? And so we know, as you can see here on the screen, I'm not going to read that to you, but it's linked to so many outcomes. And one of the things that I've learned in my career is that you can't be career, college, and life ready if you're not able to read and write, speak, and listen. And so we know from many studies that voluminous reading is very important, where you can't do that if you don't have access. Also, Dr. William Daggett, who has been studying this work for decades and decades, this is from his study back in 2003, and then he's done an updated study since then, and it's showing the same thing. And you can see whether it's career readiness, whether it's college readiness, or whether it's just life readiness. You can see the Lexile level that's expected. No longer are the days where people used to say, oh, just let him or her go to the military. It doesn't work like that now, because you can see military training manuals are at that 1180 Lexile level. And so we have to make sure we're thinking about that for our kids. So is that one of your, one of the reasons behind the work that you're looking at doing? And then one of the other things that I share with superintendents as I'm working with them is when we think about comprehensive literacy, we have a tendency to talk about all the things that occur during the school day or should be occurring during the school day, and which is very, very important. However, to say that it's comprehensive for all, you have to be thinking about outside of school access, and you have to be thinking about year-round access. And that's what our communities did, both in Virginia Beach and in Hampton. And the reason why we did that is because we knew there were equity differences. We noticed that in our division that we had some of the research that they were talking about equity was showing up in our neighborhood. And I want you to think about that for yourselves. Are you also seeing these equity differences, and where might those be? So think about a couple of questions. Do all of your students have access to text at school and in their homes? Do all of your students have access to text year-round? Do all of your students have access to quality summer programming? If any of the answers is no, you have an equity gap. And that might be in different neighborhoods. It might be in certain schools. It might be in a certain subgroup. But it's important to identify that equity gap. So as you can see here, Stephen Krashen shares, number one, we need to encourage read aloud. And to make sure that happens, families have to have books. After that, they have to understand the benefits of read alouds. So think about your community. Does your district have a plan to include outside of school and year-round support? How will you ignite this urgency around the work if you don't? Where might be your equity gap? So these are some of the things to think about as you're leading into this work, because your why is going to inspire, but it's also going to sustain. So even if you already know that you're adjusting your summer programming and using Lit Camp as a resource for that, you want to know your why behind doing that work, because that is what's going to, like I said, either inspire it or sustain it. So what were some of our challenges that we had? Access to resources, backslide over the summer, and engaging all families. The backslide over the summer had hit both the Virginia Beach Title I community and here in Hampton significantly. And we noticed that our students were backsliding anywhere between a month to 2 months over the summer, which has a very negative impact on students' reading as they go through their reading life. And so we wanted to make sure that we were thinking about, well, what are we doing? What are we providing? What's working? What's not working? Because we were providing summer school, but our kids did go into a book desert because we did find out that a large percent of our students did not have books in their homes. And then the other piece was, did our parents know the importance of reading aloud to their children? And so when you think about your community, do you have some of these same needs? Do you have students that go into book deserts over the summertime or even outside of school during the year? Do you have students that don't have quality summer programming that's being provided? Is your summer programming evidence showing that it's working or not working? So one of the things that you would want to think about is, what is your game plan with your community? So what is your why? And now this is the how. How are you going to execute that game plan with your community? How are you going to evaluate the results? And then how are you going to share the results with all? And as you can see here, I'm sharing the work that the two communities did, but I did it with them. I didn't do it to them and I didn't do it for them. They were a part of it the entire time. So what did we create? We created a three-pronged access to books programming, including kindergarten readiness, social and emotional quarterly, and summer reading distributions. We provided books and a writing journal to all students grades K-5 over the summer, and schools provided opportunities for students to participate in enrichment over the summer, and the public library partnered with us to bring some of their summer programming and incentives to the students. So how did we make this happen? Well, first we had to work with our state and central office leadership to make sure that we were going to be able to utilize the funding the way that we needed to support the schools. Then we also needed to make sure that we had the schools involved, because if you're a district office, the principals are vital in this working in their schools, along with the rest of the folks that what I call would be your coalition of the willing, those folks that they believe in this work and are willing to work with you to implement. And of course, that takes professional development and training. And then families, we also worked with our economic development department. They already had a program that they were looking at out of the city's economic development, looking at ages 0 through 8. So we brought them into the fold. The public library already had a summer program, and they were trying to increase their participation. So we collaborated with them. And then we found Scholastic, being one of the largest book publishers, and with the multicultural and diverse collections that they have, would really meet the needs of our students. So who might be your collaborative leaders? Have you already identified who they are? Have you already started to meet with them? Have you shared the why behind this work? Just a few questions to think about. As I shared earlier, you have to do this with them. You want to make sure that you are looking at solutions that are not going to be burdensome, that, it's really going to be a lot of effort for the schools to be able to participate. What can you do on the front end to make it as efficient as possible? Especially here in Virginia, and I bet there, at the end of the year, we have our standards of learning, which is our state assessment that all of our grade 3 through 5 students take. And it's at the same time when the books would be arriving for summer access. So we had to think about what were going to be the ways that we could make that more efficient for our community. And if there's any questions, please put them in the chat box, or if there's anything in particular that I've shared so far that you would like more information on, please let me know. I'm going to keep going until I hear from anyone. So sharing in best practices. How did I get my Coalition of the Willing on board? Well, we all know that there's one thing of showing other folks evidence, and then there's another thing of showing that your evidence from your own division. I did both. I thought it was really important to show that there is so much research out there on the importance of access to books and quality programming year-round. I wanted to use that as a support. So here in the there are several different things that we use during that time frame. And then here are seminal studies. This is the foundational research. And you can see decade after decade after decade, there's research studies on summer learning and its effects, and equity and access to books. And so knowing that gap and that data is so apparent, and there's many analyses around it showing that it's occurring, then I was able to go to our assessment department and say, based upon this information, I think we have an equity gap. I believe that we have some summer slide for our students that are in our low socioeconomic status neighborhoods, and I would like to run that data. We ran that data, and that data showed that we did have that significant backslide. And with that, and the data, and with the research component, I shared that with principals. I shared that with my assistant superintendent. I shared it with our family engagement liaisons, our families in general, to get the buy-in early on. And then after that, I was able to share our data. So guess what that did? It created this sense of urgency. It made people want to act. So what did we do? We created that process I just shared with you earlier, where we decided we needed a lead-in to summer access to books. We said if we just did summer access, we were missing some other portions of the year. And so we also said that we needed to address it early with our pre-K, our rising kindergartners, and make sure that when they registered for kindergarten, that we welcomed them with books. It made a huge shift, and it really allowed for folks to really say, wow, literacy is really important. They welcomed us with a pack of books. And then during the year, we did social emotional books. So that helped us make sure that at winter break and spring break and any other breaks, they would have books to read in their homes. And then, of course, we addressed summer. And then, of course, we created some summer learning experiences. So what were some of the things that we were able to do with our different partnerships? Well, one of the great things that we were able to do with Scholastic was really customize. Scholastic allowed us to customize in whatever way we needed to make sure the books were of choice for our students, and that students were able to choose based upon the genre and interests that they had. We also made sure that we looked at the following year's content. So if they were a third grade student, we knew what social studies or science content they were going to be learning. And so we put some of those books into the books that the students could choose from. And so we said to the students, we had a blend of fiction and nonfiction to read over the summer. And then also Scholastic worked with us on our logistics. So what did we want to make sure to make it as efficient as the schools? What were the distribution requests? How are we going to handle order forms and technology access? So as you're thinking about access to books programming, there are logistical steps that need to take place to help it be successful. And so those are some of the things that you'll want to think about. Then we also wanted to connect this to our public library and the summer reading challenge that they were having and the incentives. So as students were reading the books over the summer with their families, they would be able to come to the schools and receive their summer reading challenge incentives right there at the school, because a lot of our kids were able and families were able to walk to their school because they were in that walking zone. So that really allowed that access component. So that's something else to consider is, are your students able to get to your school if that's where you're going to do the incentives, or do you need to go out to their neighborhoods? And when I got to Forest Elementary School in Hampton as the principal, we realized that we needed to go to our community because they weren't in walking distance to do the access to books programming. So to make it accountable and sustainable, set your goals. What is your goal? Ours was to mitigate the backslide, and ensure that we went from 70% of our kids backsliding over the summer. We wanted to mitigate that. We wanted to stop that, and then we set that goal to stop that backslide. And then from there, we measured those goals. We did a pre and a post. We did a during implementation. And then that allowed us to say, did this work or not? And it was amazing to see that in that first summer of implementation, we went from 70% of our our students backsliding to 70% of them not backsliding, because now they had an access to books program. It makes a huge difference for kids. And then I'm no longer in Virginia Beach. I haven't been in Virginia Beach for 4 years now, and they're still doing this program because every summer the data is showing the same, that at least 70% of the kids are not backsliding over the summer because they have access to books during the summertime. But I just want to reiterate, there is a lead up to the summer programming. We do things during the year, and that really makes it a program more than just say, here's books for you to read over the summer.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes.
Would you mind unsharing and resharing your screen? Looks like someone on the
Sure.
webinar isn't seeing your PowerPoint.
Sure.
So we can try that.
Okay, let's do that. Stop share. All right, so let's see if I can share my screen again.
See if that works.
Okay.
And we will have a recording after the webinar is over that will be available. So if anyone missed anything, we'll have something to look back on.
All right, let's see. Okay, I'm sharing now. Can you see my screen?
Looks like it worked.
Wonderful.
All
Okay,
right.
great.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I know I just shared a lot of information in a very quick time frame. But here is a think and jot, just some questions for you to think about as you are thinking about year-round access and out-of-school time. So one, when you talk about comprehensive literacy and your strategic plan for your district, does it include year-round and outside of school time? If it doesn't, why isn't it included? If it isn't, do you need it and why do you need it? So that goes to the next set of questions. What is your data telling you? So we ran our data. So our students take reading screeners in the fall, the winter, and the spring. And so we already have a spring data point, which is May, and then we have our September fall data, and we use that to see for the students, like, did they backslide over the summer? Did they maintain? Those types of things. To be able to do what I did in Virginia Beach, we ran the summer data prior to the summer we did the Access to Books program, because I needed to show our division leadership that we did have the summer slide in Virginia Beach. I had to do the same thing in Hampton City schools, because like I said earlier, it's one thing to show somebody else's research and data, it's another to show your own data. So the other thing is, what is your community telling you? So when you're out talking with your community members, your different stakeholders, what are they telling you about their needs? And then so based upon that, if you do need to do this work, which is why I believe you're on the webinar, is what are the outcomes that you hope to get from doing this work? So it's really important to think with that end in mind. So what is it that you want to do and why you want to do it? So is your equity gap leading to achievement gaps? Is your equity gap leading to some of your kids not being career, college, and life ready? And is it summer backslide that is a concern for you? Is it the fact that students don't have books in their home? Is it both? So based upon that, what do you want to set as an outcome. So one of ours was mitigating the summer slide. That was one of them. Another one, of course, was getting rid of the equity gap. No one wants to hear, no superintendent wants to hear that they have an equity gap. There's not one that I've met that we figured out where their equity gap was and he said, oh, that's fine. Or she said, oh, no problem with that. We're good. They always want to take care of it. And then who and when. When, so for us, I've already contacted our deputy superintendent because I need to start preparing for summer in March. I know conversations for budgeting for summer programming starts in March. So who and when do you need to start talking to about your access to books programming? The next part of the webinar is going to be focused on summer programming. So I'm going to be sharing about the work that we've done to support literacy camps in Hampton City schools. Are there any questions about access to books before I lead into summer programming?
No questions yet.
Okay. All right. So after I left Virginia Beach, I was Title I coordinator in Virginia Beach, and then I became principal at Forest Elementary School, and now I'm the English Language Arts curriculum lead for Hampton City Schools. I work with pre-K through 12th grade curriculum instruction and assessment in my current position. So the reason why I'm sharing a little bit about the work from Forest is that's where it grew from. So at Forest, we had our theme was open a world of possible, and we know we do that through having access to great literature, students reading on grade level, students just love having the joy of reading, just loving the having a good book in their hands and reading. So we said, we want to create a positive, productive environment. We wanted comprehensive literacy, including home and year-round access, and we wanted to engage our families in their child's learning because we knew that would help us get on track. Because at the point when I became principal at Forest, we were in school improvement. We weren't meeting our state accreditation, and we weren't meeting federal accreditation at that point in time. So we knew we needed to make a change. So what did we say we were going to do? Well, of course, we wanted to make sure that our Tier 1 instruction was the way that it needed to be, and we did a focus on small group instruction. But what I'm going to share with you all today is about what we did in terms of year-round access and summer programming that helped us meet our goals. So we created, once again, for Forest, an Access to Books program, which is now expanded to almost all of our 21 elementary schools in Hampton. Hopefully, we'll be able to expand it to all 21 this year. We were providing communication around access to books year-round. We had buy-in from our literacy team, our leadership staff, and other community members. We created a plan, we set our evaluation, we created partnerships, and we did family reading, kickoffs, and ongoing communication. And as I shared with you earlier, in Virginia Beach, there was a lot of walking to the schools, but in Hampton, for our school, there wasn't. So we did pre-service neighborhood visits, and during those visits, we, as a staff, went out and we delivered books to students, and they were able to choose what they would like, and we had a great time doing that while also getting to know our neighborhoods. We also did kindergarten, so we welcomed our kindergarten parents with books when they registered. So whether it was summer, first day of school, or another day during the year, the families weren't just welcomed with paperwork. They were also welcomed with books that they could take home and read with their child. And there's a picture here of a parent with his son, and I will tell you, he shared with me that he had never really visited the school, those types of things. He wanted to be engaged in his son's education, but he never felt comfortable until we started doing the work with the Access to Books program. So the books changed the way the school feels in terms of welcoming the parents in. We did a winter book distribution, and then we did a spring book selection. That led into our summer reading programming. So we provided access to books. We did a kickoff with the families. You can see we had Clifford come and visit. We did summer calls, summer incentives, and library partnerships. And then we would get out on the buses to provide that. During the summertime, we also did read alouds right in our library where we'd invite our families to come in and read with us. We always had reading on our marquee. We had a buddy reading program where our upper grade students would read to our intermediate grade students would read to our primary grade students and vice versa. And it really just created a literacy environment, a literacy community around us. And we utilized our faith-based partnerships. We had 4 different churches that supported the work that we did, and they did many different things with us. They also opened up their doors for times that we wanted to do literacy activities with families, but we didn't want to do it on school grounds. So think about any other ideas for access to books that you might want to add to your next steps. And I know you might not be with any partners right now, but with that additional information, what else might you do for your access to books programming? And now we're going to quickly get into Lit Camp. So when I became the principal at Forest, I realized that once again, our data was showing that summer school was not working for our kids and that we needed to do something different. So every time our superintendent or deputy superintendent would visit Forest, I would ask them if I could create a literacy camp, not summer school, but literacy camp. And I wanted to create this camp along with our community to create engaging learning built upon a foundation of authentic motivational text and the 7 strings model. At that point in time, Pam Allen and Ernest Morell's book came out, The Super Reader, and it was perfect timing because that was the mindset that we had around what we needed to do for summer, that it needed to feel, sound, and look different if we were really going to make a difference for summer programming. And so you can see we actually, in the picture, we decorated the school to even make the school look different. So every time they would come, I would share with them what I wanted to do and why we needed to do it. And of course, each time they said, well, not right now, we don't have the funding, so forth and so on. However, in May, they reached out to me and shared with me that they had funding to support the camp, and so we were able to run our camp. Luckily, at that point in time, I had already started talking with my staff and sharing with them that we may have this opportunity. So I already had buy-in from the staff to want to participate. So what were our objectives? So the staff helped me develop these objectives and what we wanted to do. Once again, maintain their end of the school reading levels. We wanted to link social emotional intelligence supports to cross-curricular literacy themes, and we wanted to increase access to text and enrichment opportunities for students. Those were our goals. So how are we going to make this happen? Well, another wonderful thing occurred is I heard about Lit Camp. So not only had I read Pam Allen and Ernest Morell's book, but at that time, Lit Camp came from Scholastic. It had not been fully published at the time. I was one of the first to use it. And basically, I just said, I will even look at a PDF copy of it. I'm so excited just about the purpose of the program, because it really had it met the mindset that we had around our summer programming. And so I shared with you some of this information already. To prepare for Lit Camp, we had to do a lead up with the staff. I had to make sure that if we got the green light, that I would have the staff that's willing to teach it and coordinate it. The other thing is I needed to make sure that we were going to have transportation from the transportation department. As I shared, we are not a walking school, so we had to make sure we had transportation. And as soon as I explained to our director of transportation what we were doing and how we were piloting this to make a difference for students' reading instruction, they were right on board. So those are some things too that you would want to think about in terms of cost, is transportation costs and things along those lines, and how you might work with your director of transportation. We use Lit Camp as a foundation. We had to revise and revisit our entrance criteria into summer programming and what that was going to look like. How are we going to select the students to participate? We decided we were going to start with the K-2 program, start with our primary students, and And then we had to revisit also how this would impact possible retentions. And so we had to really think about how we could take Lit Camp as a core program and then also make sure that we had enough information over the 16-day, it was 4 weeks, 4-day program, that we'd have enough information to make a decision, not just from school year data, but how they progressed in summer programming to decide whether a child is be able to be promoted to the next grade level. Which the great part about it was 90% of the kids that participated were able to be promoted to the next grade level. And you'll see some of that data in just a moment. We used days to organize a program, but because the teachers were bought into the program, they were willing to stay and work with us on pacing and so forth. But the great part about it is Lit Camp has come so far that they have created so many different schedules, whether you run a 4-week program, a 6-week program, an 8-week program, they've created those schedules already for you all. So that's wonderful. We also created surveys for students, parents, and staff because we know qualitative data is as important as quantitative data, and I'll tell you, it made a huge difference when we had to present to the school board all the information around the camp so that we could expand it. And great to say, it has been expanded to more campsites. The other great thing about it is the professional development around Lit Camp is not time consuming. It was wonderful. We were able to provide Lit Camp training with the manuals, allowing them to get into the different daily lessons and allow them to get into their classrooms and set up their camp. Because as I shared earlier, it's really important that the students don't feel like they're walking back into a school, because then they're going to feel like they're walking right back into summer programming. The campsite needs to feel, sound, and look like a campsite. And so we were able to provide that time because the professional development does not take that long. But that's also flexible. That's the other great thing about it is if you feel as though there needs to be more professional development, you're able to set that up. The other thing that we did is create a calendar for the month of August. Our summer programming went from July, for the month of July. And we wanted to make sure that our students had books for the month of August that matched the 7 strengths themes. And so the students went home with one book for the weeks of August, along with just a fun activity activities that they could do around the different social and emotional themes. Here is how we worked with our group to think about our breakdown. Once again, like I shared earlier, Scholastic and Pam Allen have created these types of breakdowns for you. Our team looked at how we wanted to organize our half day. So you can see we went from 8:30 to noon. And I said therefore Monday through Thursday, 4-week program. You can also see how we included, mathematics in ours. So there is flexibility. That's one of the great things about Lit Camp is the flexibility that you have with the program. We didn't pull anything out of Lit Camp. We were able to add to it based upon things that we thought saw that were needed, such as small group instruction with mentor text. And we wanted to make sure that we included some mathematics literacy. And then we also included a daily innovation day where we partnered with different nonprofit organizations, and they would bring their outreach program. But as you can see, there was always reading. We never took away bunk time. We always still had bringing text to life. We just connected it to the outreach program, and they would read some nonfiction. Here were some of the extensions that we did. So as you're thinking about your program, we did a camper of the week, small group reading. We had the classroom libraries with the 7 strengths, which are available. We did sight word practice, outreach programming, family engagement. We had fun weekly CLTs for 30 minutes just to celebrate what is going on. So we brought together all kindergarten, first and second grade teachers, and they just shared the fun that they were having with the camp with each other. And it kept the momentum going. It kept the excitement alive. And it was just really, it was a fun way for us to continue to engage. So not only is the program fun and flexible and just highly engaging, this is what it does for kids. Here is our data. It's significant. In 4 weeks, 38% of our K students grew by 2 or more reading levels. 39% of first grade students grew by 2 or more reading levels, and in second grade grew by 2 or more reading levels. Our goal was to maintain, but what ended up happening is 90% of the kids either maintained or increased their reading level. 75% of them increased their reading level. 32 of the campers who are not reading on grade level would be on grade level the next year starting school. That's huge to start the next year as an on grade level reader. So what was some of the feedback that we got from teachers, families, and students? You can see how engaging the program was. So now at the division, we had to think about how we were going to scale this up, right? That's the big thing. It went really, really well at a site with 3 schools coming together. But what do you do when you have all 21 schools participating? How do you scale it up? And so what we decided to do was in year 1, right after the Forest pilot, we expanded to for all K through 2 students, their sites to participate in Lit Camp and what we created. And we have site coordinators at all of our sites, so we provided them training, and we did a train the trainer model, and they trained their own teachers. We know if you do something, you're going to understand it really well. So we trained our site coordinators to then train their own teachers at their sites. We also did material adjustments and ordering, and then we did an updated pacing document. And then, of course, as I shared earlier, we had to make sure everybody understood the new entrance criteria and promotion criteria, and how to do the weekly reports that would go home to we created those, and how to share those with families each week. And then in year 2, which was last summer, we expanded to all K4 students participating, and we did a middle school pilot and got just remarkable results once again from our middle school. And our middle school is grades 6 through 8. Once again, we trained our site coordinators, we got community partners, we did material adjustments, ordering, we updated the pacing, and then we created the pacing for middle school, which we are looking at again for this year. So this summer, where are we at? All K5 students will participate. All middle school students will participate. We're training all site coordinators. We're getting community partners. We're doing material adjustment and ordering. We're updating pacing and making pacing for grades for grade 5 who will now be participating. So I know that was a lot of information in a very quick time frame, but this is what it does. It creates a community of hope, and hope is self-efficacy and optimism, and self-efficacy is the belief in oneself, and optimism is a positive outlook. And it's really important when we think about what we do to ensure literacy. We can't do it during the school day alone. Your tier 1 and tier 2 supports during the day, yes, must be strong. Your tier 3 must be strong. However, we also know that the outside of school and year-round time is vital, and it can make a huge difference in the lives of children to ensure that they are career, college, and life ready. So when you think about it, it's getting it started wherever you are in your game plan with your community, whether it's you're setting your why and getting everybody to believe in the work and finding your evidence of why you need this, or whether you already have that done and you're right now in the midst of creating your game plan and how you're going to roll this out, or you're in the middle of executing the game plan because you start summer programming in May. Just depending on where you are, it's who's with you and getting it started, because it's vital for all students to take that step. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions anyone might have regarding access to books or summer programming, anything that I've shared from today.
All right, we can stay online for a couple more minutes if there are any questions. Feel free to type in the chat box. Kelly, can you see the chat now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So Lit Camp is a resource. If you go online, you'll be able to see a lot of information regarding Lit Camp. The book that I referred to is The Super Reader. It was written by Pam Allen and Ernest Morrell, and it talks about the 7 strengths of a super reader, and it really helped us anchor the why in terms of the social and emotional learning component. And then Lit Camp is the resource that we used that was created by Pam Allen, that basically what it provides for you is the 7 strengths broken down with what your day would look like. So you would have opening campfire, you would have bringing text to life, you have community lit. There's just a fun activities that you can do, and it's really spelled out in such a nice way around the different strengths. And Tracy would be able to send a sampler to you and get you that information. So we just need to know where you're located, and she'll be able to get that information to you via email, and you can get that sampler and really look at Lit Camp.
Yeah, and I can connect those dots too if we want to get that over to Pamela.
I think that would be great. And that is such a good suggestion. I think the next time I do the webinar, I can even just put like a sample of a couple sample picture photo slides in of Lit Camp so folks can see what that resource looks like.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and there you go, Chilton Elementary.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, I just appreciate everybody being on the webinar today, and both Mitchell and Tracy know how to get in touch with me. So if there's any other questions that come up afterward as you're planning the next steps, they can definitely get you back in contact with me. And of course, Tracy can answer questions also along with Mitchell. So thank you all so much for participating today.